Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Check-In Podcast. Now with good lighting for the YouTube viewers. So now you can see every single blemish that I'm subconscious about, now in high definition. But if you're a new listener, new viewer, you may not have even seen that stuff, so this is a fresh start. Welcome to the party. In any case, I'm Joe Anthony Myrick, feel free to call me Jam, and I'm the host of this show. But if you're a returning listener, then hey, cool, you see the growth. You've been with me from this journey from the very beginning, and hopefully we can all grow together. That's what this whole podcast is about: growing, learning, healing. Hopefully we can heal together. And in this episode, we're healing with my guest today. Two friends, two profound voices in the wrestling community. A podcaster by the name of Mr. Warren Hayes of the Mr. Warren Hayes podcast, and a journalist, Kristen Ashly, founder of the website Bell to Bells. But before we transition into that conversation, I want to preface this by talking a little bit about knowing when it's time to remove yourself from a situation that you previously enjoyed but no longer serves you. Ultimately removing things from your life which no longer serve you, because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, knowing when it's time to let something go. I know I used to struggle with that, and I thought about this because my conversation with Kristen and Warren, it called me back to a time when I was in the wrestling community and ultimately why I left the job that I had within it. That job being at Daily DET, a wrestling website that I was a writer for about a year, and then maybe a little less than a year than that, I got promoted to being a co-editor for the website. And in terms of just looking back at my career and really my life, my time at Daily DET, it gave me some of the best memories that I've ever had. It might even be the best job I ever had, simply because of the team I worked with, all like-minded individuals, positive individuals, all working towards the goal of just creating something that campaigns for positive change in the industry. But then something changed early in this year and how I felt about the job. And it didn't really hit until the pandemic, at a time when I was already stressing about life, the depression I was going through, and it all just coincided with each other at the same time. Then a lot of stuff came out of the wrestling community that made me question if I even wanted to be a part of that community anymore. So much stuff that you could probably make a whole podcast about it, but in trying to condense this introduction, keeping it short, I'm going to say, well, first off, I want to say, if you want a more in-depth analysis of what the community's been rocked by in the last few months, look up the speaking out movement, hashtag speaking out, but trigger warnings in advance, because the speaking out movement was essentially the wrestling equivalent of the Me Too movement in Hollywood. But again, to keep it short so we can move on, the stuff I was learning in this movement was turning my stomach in ways I'd say I just didn't want anything to do with wrestling anymore. Now, that isn't to say that the wrestling world's bad, or that any of the wrestlers in the industry or people in wrestling, people who watch wrestling, are all bad. That's not what I'm saying at all. There are a lot of good apples in this community who even actively advocate for change and producing good things in this industry, many of which were at Daily DET. But it was more than that, really. It was more than this movement in terms of why I started to take steps to pull away from Daily DET. The basic functions of my job suddenly felt amplified in a way that was really weighing on my mental health. It was all just too much all at once, is what I'm trying to say. And when I realized this, I knew that something in my life had to change, and the thing that I felt like I really need to pivot from was this job. I realized that this job no longer served me. I realized that the wrestling world in general just doesn't serve me anymore. I just don't have the energy for the stuff like I used to. Even hearing about all the stuff that's been happening since I left, it just kind of makes me tired more than anything. I can't analyze that world anymore. I can't investigate it. I can't actively take steps to try to improve it, even if I had the tools to do so. Granted, knowing that there are still active voices out there who are louder, stronger than mine, are still actively trying to produce change in wrestling, that makes me happy a little bit, but I just couldn't be a part of it anymore. But to end this, to condense this rambling and branch it back to you in a way that you can relate to and you can get a takeaway message, I want to say that the moment you realize that something or someone which once brought you joy but suddenly no longer brings you the same kind of satisfaction and is actually doing more harm to you than good, or even has a toxic quality to it now, then it is absolutely necessary for you to leave it behind and let it go. Now, you can try and make it work. Absolutely try and make it work. I tried to make it work. But if it's still hurting you after you try, then that should be confirmation that it's best left in the past. And I say that in knowing and understanding that staying in a situation that you're no longer happy with, be it with a partner, with a job, wherever, it comes with a sense of security. And the thought of leaving that security behind is always scary. It's always going to be scary. I was scared when I left Daily DT, and it's not just because quitting your job in the middle of a pandemic is kind of questionable. It's a little bit questionable, I'll admit. I didn't really know if there would be a light at the end of the tunnel for me, and that is kind of terrifying. But I'm happy to say now that enough time has passed where I can say I made the right decision for myself and my well-being. After I put in my notice and my exit was finalized, which everyone understood and was very supportive in my decision, more supportive than I expected, it felt like a weight just lifted off my shoulders, and within days my head was clearer. I felt better in every sense of that word, better. Now, I won't lie, that isn't to say that there still wasn't at least a solid week of just frantically being afraid enough that I was job hunting like crazy. But when that fear subsided, I was happy in a way that I could see the benefits at least. Again, clearer head, happier thoughts, more time to work on myself and do things that make me happy, attract things and people who also make me happy. And I even found another job which even pays better than my time at Daily DET. Not to say that the pay was ever the issue, it wasn't even a factor in me leaving, but that's just one of the many perks that comes with, I guess, betting on yourself. That's what it boils down to. You need to make a bet with yourself, invest in yourself, invest in your time, because that's what it really is at the end of the day. Now I'm thinking about it, it's leaving something which no longer serves you is an investment. It's a risky investment, but I think when you give it time, that investment pays off. And let me be clear, just because a situation no longer serves you, it doesn't mean that it was a waste of time. Like, there was so much personal growth that I garnered from being at Daily DET, being in the wrestling community as a whole. I'm always going to cherish people I met that helped my career and helped me grow as a person. One of those people is actually Kristen Ashly. She gave me my first editing job, and with that experience, this was at another website, by the way, and with that experience, I was able to take it to Daily DT, help my resume look a whole lot more impressive, and help me get that promotion, really. So I thank her for that, and her and Warren are two people who I like to call friends in the wrestling community who still support me even after I've left it. So, with that said, I hope you take something away from what I just said, and hopefully it makes you a little bit excited to get into this conversation with Kristen and Warren, which I'm going to transition to right now. Welcome back to the Mental Health Check-In podcast. My next two guests are two people who are very, very near and dear to my heart. One is actually, they're both very active in the wrestling community. One is the founder of the greatest women's wrestling website on the planet, and the other is the founder of the Mr. Warren Hayes podcast. Give it up for Mr. Warren Hayes and Kristen Ashly. How y'all doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Jam?
I'm doing really good.
And so am I. I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you
So
for asking. It's great to be here. Thank you for having us.
So happy to hear that. And thank you for coming on. So for people not too familiar with y'all, let's just start at the beginning, I suppose. How did you two meet?
Funny story. So, at the time, his name was Joe Soriano. But his real name is Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
And
shout out to Kevin Parvizi, very good guy.
Yes, I worked under him for a fan-sided site called NFL Spin Zone, and he saw that I was tweeting about wrestling. I was heavily a mark at that time, but he saw that I was tweeting about wrestling. He said, "Do you want to come work for Daily DDT?" So I did, and I don't know if you've ever been to a Slack where there's a lot of people. Sometimes there's there's Slack channels like technical issues or social media networking, whatever it is, right? And there were a couple individuals, I couldn't even tell you who they who were really obnoxious on some of the channels, like heavily self-promoting, a lot of Follow Fridays garbage, just blowing up our notifications for nothing. And obviously, anytime you get a tech issue channel, it's just hilarious. So I remember putting something, I think it was in the general chat for Daily DDT, and I get this DM from Warren, and we had a good laugh over them. So really, we first connected over making fun of people, if you can believe it.
Wow, I never knew that. Wow.
Yeah.
But like low grade, it's like obviously everyone is avatars, you just see names, and you're essentially just making fun of how they're acting, and what they're posting about. It's not like, oh, that person's so fat, nothing like that.
No, we weren't like overtly mean. It was more like, I can't handle that guy posting another self-promoting, it was like 3 times a day he's linking himself, and we've seen those people who, and it's not like Twitter, it's just like the networking channel, but 3 times a day, buddy, like that's not necessary. And so we would just be like, oh, it's 2 p.m. where so-and-so's, Slack message promoting an article he wrote. So it wasn't like mean. we weren't.
We were just critiquing their content. Is what we were doing.
Yeah, we were like we were companions in annoyance, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
I know exactly what you mean by that, I think. And if for what it's worth, for as long as I've known the both of y'all, neither one of y'all have been ever like maliciously mean towards anyone in public or private. So I 100% believe y'all.
Yeah, like I said, the question wasn't to be. It wasn't to be. There's no one that we hated. It's not like we were looking to destroy anyone. We were just like poking some fun amongst ourselves.
Like jabs.
We just bonded over common annoyances, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Right. That's funny. How did that evolve into let's try this whole dating thing?
Oh God, such a convoluted story. Well, then I kind of like disappeared from social media for a few months for my own mental well-being. And he was one of like 5 people who at that time when I just left, had DM'd me and said, "I hope you're okay." So when I came back, I said, "Oh, I'm fine. I just really need to take a break." And I just did it abruptly. We've all been there. And then it just became a friendship of just talking. And we had, honestly, his humor attracted me to him first and foremost. And we just chatted about stuff, and I would go to his shows. And as you know, you were at that time, you were frequent in the chat. His chats were so fun, and his post shows were so fun. And so I was a regular there, and then it just kind of built into a friendship. We would have like a group DM with Anthony Suter from Smart to Death, and JPQ from formerly from Big Paws. No Angle podcast.
No particular angle, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, JPQ. I love you. And and we would have group DMs, and they would make fun of me for not knowing anything about Japan, and we would like talk about the ridiculousness on Twitter every day, and it just became this friendship. And then it became clear that, to be honest, I chased him. He was like, whatever. He played, the person he is in real life is who he is in real life, and I chased him. Eventually, he just stopped running and just became something more.
Oh, that's actually really beautiful. Really beautiful.
The thing that I really liked most about Kristen was well, first and foremost, her intelligence. I think she's just how incredibly sharp and aware that she is. That was one of the main things that made me, and I know she hates when I say this, but gravitated me towards her. And that was one of the main things. But then as I got to know her more, and I discovered layers, because of course, as you talk more and you become you open yourself up to people, you discover layers and things that you don't necessarily present, that you don't necessarily put forward, especially on stuff like Twitter. So I discovered sides of her that were unexpected, pleasingly unexpected. And it ended up being a kind of a total package kind of thing. And turns out that she's probably the strongest woman I've ever met. And her drive, her passion are things that just clicked for me. I'm not going, if we're going to talk about it without going too much into detail, I had stepped out of a relationship, a very, very long-term relationship, with someone who in many, many aspects was the opposite of Kristen. And for me, when we became very close after the relationship came to an end, I saw a lot of things. I realized just how much I had compromised on a lot of stuff, on how a relationship can mold you into something maybe that you think is, oh, okay, well, this is how it's supposed to go. But no, you don't have to compromise so much on who you are and so on and so forth. I know I'm being very vague right now, but still, Kristen had so many things that I was like, this is fantastic, and I want this in my life. I just want to grab onto it and hold on to it. So things just progressed from there. Yeah.
He knows I'm squirming over here because I just hate when he gushes about me, like for real. So I'm just like, he's doing it because he knows I can't say anything on the call.
If it makes you feel better, you and me both. Like, I'm glad that I'm not on camera right now, because like I can feel myself like blubbering a little bit. Like y'all love stories, just really beautiful. And I really wasn't expecting that.
Oh yeah, well you're getting the first. We don't talk much about. I mean, well, I guess Anthony and JPQ probably hear the most about our stupidness, but nobody else really knows a lot about it. So you're kind of getting the inside scoop, if anybody even cares, I guess.
It took me leaving wrestling media to finally get my first scoop. I feel honored.
Yeah.
Better late than never.
Right.
So how going from that, how did you two know that you were in love? What is love, and how did you two know that you were in it with each other?
Well, for me,
Yeah.
it was that somebody could put up with me. I I'm not an easy person. He would say, "Oh," but I'm not. I can get moody. I am diagnosed with bipolar, and although I am, medicated for it, sometimes things flare up. And being that I am also in sobriety, I mean, geez, it's like this double whammy because people in sobriety, if they're not working their program correctly, they can also be what's considered a dry drunk and just be a miserable person. And so sometimes I would have little flashes like that, and he was so patient and so kind, and honestly was so supportive in ways I had never felt support, even from family. And it was like, is this love? Is this what love is supposed to? This unconditional, like no matter what you do, unless it's like killing animals or children or people, no matter what you do, I'm always going to feel the same about you. No matter what you look like, I'm always going to feel the same about you. No matter what you say, I would lash out at him sometimes just in the heat of the moment. And I mean, that to me, I wasn't raised with codependency, but there was there were some times where family relationships are very codependent, and you're walking on eggshells all the time. And for him to not waver, that was very important to me. And it felt like love, the support, the kindness, the understanding, the trustworthiness, the fact that I would be an anxious mess and he would go, it's fine, it's totally fine. And that he has said to me probably a gazillion times, no matter what you do, I will support you and I will love you. And that to me was love. And me and him talk about it a ton. We talk about being partners.
Yeah.
Love is not one sided. It's, we are in this together. It's open communication. It's, being maybe, sitting on the couch with cookie dough and going, ugh, these Twitter jerks, right? But also, like, but also, the little things like doing dishes and the big things like some of the stuff we've done online together and being a partners and best friends first really helped to formulate what love was for us because we had a very solid foundation.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think there's always like one key element. I think there's one key element that everyone sort of needs filled and maybe doesn't realize it until it happens upon you. Um, as Kristen has, like, she just expressed what I bring for her, the understanding and all that, the support, putting up with her, like she likes to say, and she's not that bad. She really isn't. She likes to play herself up like this mater, but she's not. Anyway, for me, the thing that Kristen brought to me was a sense of identity, and this is really weird. But I'm like I said, out of a relationship. I've had kids in the previous relationship, and depending on your situations, being a parent can, and I'm not saying this in any negative light, but being a parent can skew the perception of your identity as a person. It's like when I see people on their Facebook pages, their avatars, it's always them with the picture of their child. I it I have nothing against that. I've done that before, but even before being a parent, you are a person, right? So you're allowed to have an identity. Your identity can be larger than your family, can be larger than your kids, and it's important that you don't lose sight of that. And throughout a whole bunch of circumstances, and I'm definitely not blaming my kids here, because there are many factors at work that we'd have to schedule a 6-hour podcast if we wanted to talk about the last 25 years of my life. But um, Kristen gave me a sense of identity. helped me find who I was, the Warren that had been lost in the shuffle for all those years, because of the many different roles that I had to portray as a parent, as a partner in a relationship, as a caregiver in certain situations, being a sole breadwinner. There was a lot of stuff that I was projecting before projecting my own needs, wants, desires, who I am, what do I want to do. I was always on the back burner, and that's one of the things that shocked me the most, with Kristen, because she's honestly my biggest cheerleader. Sorry, Jam.
Darn.
Demoted.
And because she really is, everything I do, the confidence with which I do things is because she always says just the right things. She always says, and even if it's just as basic as "I believe in you," when she says it, I know she means it. So that to me, that to me is a huge part of what love is how that person, the other person, can help establish you, maintain you as a human, as a person who exists and has a reason to exist and has wants and needs and passions, but without neglecting, the partnership, like she said, because we do believe in the idea that we're partners, that that the two of us are in here and that we're supporting each other. But she just gave me so much on that level, and everything I've undertaken since then has been in utmost confidence.
I think you put that really amazingly well, especially in regards to just what a partnership in any relationship is supposed to be. Because people say all the time that you have to support your partner. It's literally a partnership, but I'm not sure a lot of people really know what that necessarily entails. And I think you both really hit the nail on the head. A lot of times, supporting someone isn't just co-signing their decisions, but it's verbally being their biggest cheerleader, saying, "I believe in you, I have faith in you." And you two have always done that for each other in private and public. From the few chats I've shared with y'all, like, y'all have always really had each other's back, and I really admire that.
And it's not hard because Kristen is extremely good at what she does.
Mm-hmm.
She's super talented. If she was, if she could only put together 5-word sentences and forget how to use commas, I'd be like, "Well, sweetie, have you thought about taking up pottery?" But you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
there's, of course I do it out of the goodness of my heart, but I also do it because I sincerely believe in her skills and her talent as well. So it just makes the whole process easier.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you brought up, I'm sorry, Kristen, were you about to say something?
No, go ahead. It's fine.
I was just going to say that since Warren mentioned skills and talents, that brings up something I also really thought was really interesting between you two. The fact you're both essentially in the same field, in the same space of wrestling. And that's not easy for a lot of couples to share the same working space. A lot of people need space from each other, and like having different work fields does that. But you two not only make it work in in both of your approaches to wrestling, Kristen being the founder of Bell to Bells, Warren doing his podcast, you both even like interviewed people together, and like that type of sharing up together. Like, how do you make that work, sharing the same space like that?
Well, we don't live together, right? We're separate. So some of that helps is that we're not like right this second we are attached to the hip, but we're not we don't live together. So, if I wanted to take a break from him, I would just hang up the phone or hang up the call or whatever. So that kind of helps. So we're not traditional in that way. But also, you know, we're also in different types of the wrestling industry. We're in different sections. I don't feel very comfortable doing my own podcasting. I never have. I don't think I'm a very good host. I probably wouldn't make it I tried a few times, but I don't think I would make it a full-time thing, whereas he doesn't like to write full-time. So we kind of have separate areas that we like to work on, but also they complement each other. So while he may not be great at writing, I can help with that. And he has helped me a ton with podcasting and the tech stuff that I have done. So our skill sets complement each other, which is really helpful, but also, knowing that we have different strengths and that no one's stepping on each other's toes. And part of being a partnership is always rooting for the other person. So, I'm always going to help him in any way I can. And it's not taken away from me. And I wish more people saw that in general in the wrestling industry. There's enough room for all of us.
Sure.
And so, it's not even my field, really. Podcasting is not my arena. But I don't think that it should have to matter, to be honest.
I think there's a lot that has to do with maturity as well.
Yeah.
I do believe that the fact that we're non-traditional in our current living situations, let's put it that way. I think there's still a level of maturity because in the past, I've been through both, where I have been in relationships with people who were deeply entrenched in the same types of interests or activities that I was, and never got a break from it. And then in another relationship where whatever I did, there was no interest in what I did, right? So I've been in both, and I think that coming back to a relationship where I'm sharing the same type of interest slash passion, wrestling, with someone, and then doing work in that sphere. I think this time around it's working well because I think because we're both adults, and we have very like Kristen said, we have our own our own spheres, the different approaches to how we go about it. But we don't always talk about wrestling either. We're not like sitting at the dinner table and be like, hey, so we should sit down and start our top 10 matches of the week. It's like at some point we sort of move on, and I think that's part of maturity as well. Just be able to have a different type of outlet as well, talking about other things. It's important on that level too. So yeah, I think it just has a lot to do with. I think there's a lot that has to do with just being mature about it.
Well, and boundaries.
And boundaries, sure.
We don't only do wrestling stuff together. We play ridiculous games together all the time, like Scrabble and Yahtzee. And, like this weekend, we're going to take a little weekend trip and there's no working, so boundaries. Nope. Yes, we might, talk about wrestling for the 2 hours we're sitting in front of the TV Wednesday nights, but then we do something else. Then we watch 30 Rock until 1:00 in the morning or whatever it may be. We're also, people are not one dimensional usually. So we have other interests, and I think we bring that out on each other. He encourages my other interests and I encourage his, and there's separate interests as well. So then it's kind of like, okay, you go do your thing, you go cook, I'm going to go paint, and we can have, and we're also communication. Like I said, we're also more than willing to say, I just need 5 minutes away from your face. Or I'll say, because I have ADHD, and so sometimes I get very overstimulated with it, and I'll say to him, I just have to go into the bedroom for 10 minutes with the lights off and no noise, so I can just kind of, power down, and he will let me do that. That's part of it too, is just communication.
Yeah, that's incredibly mature, like you said. Curious, you mentioned boundaries. How do you communicate? What's the best way to communicate boundaries with a partner? Because I feel like that can be difficult sometimes, whether something gets lost in translation or someone just takes it a little bit personally. What do you do at that point in the relationship to communicate boundaries with each other?
It's trial and error.
Right.
For real though. Like it's, you know, I remember like the first few times Kristen would tell me, I have attention deficit disorder. I'm like, cool. It's like, all right. But, thanks for sharing. But it's not until it's really put into practice that I understand. Or like Kristen's like, hey, I'm not going to swear on your podcast, but
I
hey,
mean, you can.
hey, you guy, let's put it that way. I need a break. You're overwhelming me right now. I'm like, don't you understand? I have ADHD. Oh, oh, I get it. Okay, now, like, there's one thing it's one thing to communicate and talk about it and be aware about it, be aware of it, but there's nothing like, hands-on, hands-on experience where you're like, oh, this is the thing here. Okay, so, and then there it creates a situation, but then you absolutely become aware of a certain boundary after a few times when that person gets irritated and is like, look, I told you about this. Why aren't you doing? I told you about X. Why aren't you doing Y? Oh, okay. Now I understand. Anyway, on my side, there's a lot of that's how it registers for me. It's like at some point, and it's not like I'm necessarily pushing buttons or trying to see how far I'm able to go. It's just like, oh, okay, now I understand how in the real world, in our everyday life, this is how it applies. This can have an impact on this level. So, oh, okay, cool. Now I know to react this way then.
It's also patience and understanding and not getting frustrated with each other. And that's why I say communication is so important, because if you're not telling the person, like, this is a boundary, they're going to keep crossing that line and not know it. And then if you don't tell them this is a line, you're just going to, I mean, for me at least, I'll snap. And then what communication is going to actually happen when you're yelling at each other? None, right? So,
Hmm.
and it's for me, it's not like he has his boundaries, I have my boundaries. We have shared boundaries. Like, for me at least, it's we have to communicate what our shared boundaries are. What are we both considering boundaries? Because, you know, I'm not going to throw a boundary on him and then he has a good reason to not like that boundary for whatever it is. Like, if we take like his boundary, which is a reverse boundary, I guess his preference is that he holds my hand in public. And my boundary is, well, I don't want to always I don't want to do that. So, we have to have shared boundaries and communicate those, and then say, okay, well, we'll hold hands this often or whatever. Or, explain why it's a boundary, because I don't want to hurt his feelings by saying, can you not touch me right now? When really it's a stimuli that I can't handle at the moment. And, he might take it the wrong way if I don't communicate why that's a boundary.
That's understandable.
Yeah.
Like y'all said, it goes in hand with a certain maturity that's necessary to get to that type of communication in a relationship. And I think it's just also about knowing enough about yourself where you
Mm-hmm.
need to be aware of your your own boundaries and your own triggers, and then you need to know how to communicate that. And that's difficult in itself. Even in these last few months, I'm learning about my own
Yeah.
triggers and boundaries, and that was always hard to communicate to other people. But it's like Warren said earlier, it's a trial and error type of thing before you can really communicate that in a relationship. And I think when you can communicate that, it builds for stronger relationships. Y'all are the living proof there.
Yeah. Self-awareness is super important. And, I talk all the time about when I was still drinking before I got sober, and man, I had all the self-awareness in the world, but I wasn't willing to change anything. And some people are alcoholics with zero self-awareness. And to some point I had zero because I had no idea the damage I was doing to the world outside me. I was very, very self-absorbed. But self-awareness is so important because if you don't have that, if you're not aware of, like you said, your triggers or just your behaviors in general and your cognitive function, how you think, then there's no way of communicating that with somebody else. They're just going to find it out third hand. And, you know, the disease, some of the mental diseases that people have do end up with tempers flaring. I mean, there's so many of them, right? So many of like PTSD and, you know, general anger issues, depression sometimes, anxiety for sure, ADHD, all kinds of stuff. If there's misunderstandings, this anger flares, and I have seen it in myself in the past. Nothing gets done when I get angry. So the only way that I can fully communicate is by being self-aware. To me, it's incredibly important.
I concur. No, I agree. There's the tricky part. Well, okay. I'm trying to say too many things at once. I think that you know, we live in a time in history where there's a lot of focus on, yeah, but what about me? About me? What it's about me? Me. And there is a level of where there is a certain level where you have to you do have to give up some of you do have to give up some of you to make room for the wants of your partner. I think that's normal. And some people find it very difficult because of the world we live in right now. Because I think there's a lot of factors that make people focus on, yeah, but that are very centered on themselves. And I don't think it's necessarily individually speaking a problem. I think it's more global. But so when we get to situations where we want to communicate boundaries, I can understand, not that I agree, but I can understand why some people can have very adverse reactions. Why won't you hold my hand? You know, do you not love me? So, whoa. You know, that's not necessarily it. You know, and so there. So on one hand, there is that part where you have to give up a little of yourself and be open to changing maybe your own expectations or perceptions about certain things. But the goal ultimately, and the trick, is to not lose yourself in the meantime. You know, and that's what a partnership is that at some point you give a little, you take a little. And it's really, really important to not lose focus of who you are within your couple, within your relationship. Because yeah, it is really easy, really easy to just like function as two instead of functioning as two individual people, you know, functioning as a pair versus two individual people who are working together. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And you said something really interesting. You said that
Who, me?
yes, Warren.
Kristen,
My
can
bad.
you write this down on the calendar that I said
No,
something very interesting?
I'm having amnesia suddenly.
What you said that was interesting was that you said that relationships are essentially about sacrifice, and you have to give up a part of yourself to really give in to your partner's needs. And I was hoping, maybe both of you, can you elaborate on that and how you give up part of yourself without losing yourself in the process?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of it's day-to-day stuff. Like, you know, this is new to us, him being here and spending a couple weeks at a time. This is the second time he's visited me. So just even day-to-day stuff, like giving up space, giving up control. Giving up control is a huge thing because human beings are control freaks by nature. We think we can control everything, even though daily we get reminders that we control nothing. And so giving up some of that control, like, listen, I can't control how clean he is. I can tell him, can you please rinse out the sink when you're done with dishes? But I can't control him. So my response to him, I can only control my response to him. And so it's like little day things. I don't think that I've had to give up any like serious part of myself. Like, I had to give up wanting to be a painter because he just hates the smell of acrylic paints or something. I've never had to give up that, but there's, time. I give up time sometimes for him to support him, and vice versa. He gives up time for me sometimes to support me. And it's about, for us, I feel like it's about for us, like, sacrifice for the greater good. Like, if he needs me to do something for his podcast and I think it's going to be really good for him, I'm going to give up that time because I know it's good for him, and vice versa. It's doing something for that other person. And so it's not necessarily like, I have to give up my home for him, or he has to send me all of his money from his bank accounts, or, we don't have to give up our lives, but making room and doing it for the greater good. And a lot of that really is just day-to-day stuff. Like, sometimes one of us wants to be up till 2 a.m. watching Twin Peaks. And sometimes the other person's like, I've got to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I can't do that.
And then the other person says, yeah, but Dale Cooper tonight is going to reveal who killed Laura Palmer. And then the other person's like, fine.
And then I'm like, why did I watch this? So, like, it's sacrifice, but it's also just like compromise, I think is probably a better word,
Yeah, I don't like the term sacrifice as much as I once did. Because I don't think there's anything noble in giving up things for the love of your life. Again, making a broad, maybe giving up the use of hard drugs is a good thing.
Give up heroin. Yeah.
For instance, that's cool. If Kristen were to ask me that, not that I do it, but
oh God.
But because I think as far as big picture stuff, I don't think that you should give up things that provide you that spark in life. I could never ask Kristen to give up writing because that's the spark that drew me to her. It's these elements that make her. So to me, it's more like how do I help her in this? And I think that's what the sacrifice, and I'm doing air quotes here, is. It's more like, how do I become a good support for her to continue down this path, because she obviously likes it. If Kristen were to turn around and said, bro, you have to stop podcasting, I said, well, hang on a second. It's like, we have to have a talk about this, because the big picture stuff is what makes a couple. It's what makes a successful partnership. Then when it comes to, stuff like, okay, I will use a coaster when I drink. Well, that's that's something that I will adapt, because it's something that I can adapt to make my better half happy in her everyday life. One less irritant. Fine, I'll pull out a coaster and I'll put my drink on top. Whereas usually I just put my drinks anywhere. It doesn't really matter. but I'm exaggerating. But that's the thing, is that it's on the big picture stuff, the things that really are part of your identity. I don't think anyone should give that stuff up. I think you need to find someone who can, because in my case, that's it. In my case, that is exactly it. I said it maybe a little vaguely at first, but the fact that Kristen every day tells me that I'm good at what I do, well, and I'm exaggerating. She doesn't say it every day, but the fact that she does motivate me and does tell me, that you're good at what you do, you like it, and she encourages me to push forward, to sink more time into it. That's something that's extremely meaningful to me, because because it ends up making me happy. So on the flip side, I'm okay to do the same for her. Not that I needed her necessarily to do it in the first place, but it just becomes a lot more natural then.
It's about picking your battles too. Like,
Oh
and that's
boy.
where it goes back to the control stuff. Like, everybody has personal, and we talked about this last night a little bit with some stuff, but everybody has personal preferences on, like, day-to-day stuff, chores, how do you fold the laundry, or how do you make the bed, or everybody has little preferences that they grew up with or that they've just become habit, and so they've got this little grasp on it. It feels right to them. It feels, like normal. And so, if the battle is, I'm just going to have to deal with once in a while wiping down the counter after him, okay, I'll deal with it. That's not a battle I'm going to fight to the death. But if he says the only way you can be with me is if you never pick up a pen again and write, well, that's a battle I'm going to fight, because it's my passion. It brings me purpose. So it's just the same thing with, a lot of couples probably, from my experience with my friends and stuff, they don't last very long because of the big battles, like getting married, having children, where do they want to live, that kind of stuff. If it's, if people are breaking up because so and so isn't picking up the towel off the floor, then I mean that's not the real problem. So it's about picking your battles, and so then you won't have to really sacrifice much, because the battles that you do fight are going to be the big ones that matter the most.
I think that's very well said. I'm glad you both verbalized that distinction between compromise versus sacrifice. If you were quote unquote sacrificing something you love for your partner, then that's a battle that you gotta fight. But if your partner is suggesting something that will ultimately make you better, then that might be a compromise that's worth making. I'm glad you both made that distinction.
Right.
And we both kind of talked about mental health and ebbs and flows here and there, but just tackling it head on a little bit. How has having a partner that you love dearly made your life easier mentally? How has your mental health improved since being together?
Well, I have somebody who's essentially a sounding board. I think of, like, when COVID started. I mean, I live alone. I work from home. Everything I do is from home. I would see people when I go to the grocery store very infrequently, and just how, like, I know that cabin fever would have just crept in if I didn't have somebody to talk to. And sometimes you just need to vent. Sometimes you're like, I want to complain about my boss today, like all day. and and he doesn't tell me to shut up. He doesn't make it like, your worries and concerns are not valid. Like, he makes it known to me that I'm okay in thinking this, I'm okay in feeling this, and I'm here to listen to you. And I know from my past, and granted, this is back when I was drinking, but if something just even minor irritated me, my mind would start to ruminate. And that's just part of, bipolar depression and the agitation that I had with my mania. So I would just ruminate and ruminate and ruminate and ruminate and think about it all day. And I would talk to people about it, and I could hear myself talking about it and see them like visibly not wanting to deal with it anymore. And I still couldn't stop myself from talking about it and ruminating, and nobody wanted to listen. Now, granted, back then I don't blame them, but to have somebody who's like, he's literally said to me, just vent, call me. You want to vent? Let's just spend an hour and complain about your boss. Let's vent. That to me has helped my mental health so much, because it tells me that, one, he cares about my problems. Two, that he wants to help me find a solution, and that even if there isn't a solution, just letting that stress off, and that he recognizes that's something that I need to do. I mean, that's huge. And I think that's part of being very open and honest with each other, is that we know what each other needs in that situation. And so for me personally, just having a sounding board, like, I don't need constant, constant validation with work. I don't need constant validation with, looks. I don't need all of that. But what I need is somebody to sit down essentially and be like the wall when I am like having a really hard day and just super annoyed. And it happens more than I'd probably like to admit. And sometimes it's for a minute, and sometimes it's for 20 minutes. And sometimes he's like, Chris, let's find a solution because you keep bringing this up. And that's the other thing too, is you get outside of your own head with things.
Yeah.
And so he can see patterns that I can't see because I'm in my own head. So he might go, you're bringing up this person a lot. You're saying this stuff a lot. Like, maybe we should handle it. Mm-hmm. So being that sounding board is like just being a pair of ears. That's really important.
It's like, it's like having your standing next to a tree, but having your nose like stuck on the trunk. So you see the trunk, but you never see the whole tree. How's that for an analogy?
Nice.
Thank you.
That Oscar Wilde or?
No, it's Warren Hayes.
Right, you wrote that, I'm sure.
Warren W. Hayes. No, but she's right, because she's the same, and you do need that. You do need that capacity to get out of your head, to be able to bounce stuff off of people, because to me, like, Kristen has been a rock for me over the past 18 to 20 months at this point. She's helped me through some extremely stressful moments in my life, some very, very big decisions, and just impromptu stuff happening as well, where I just I pick up the phone and I call her, and usually when I call, like when we call, because usually we text and then we set up like a room on, Google Meet or whatever. And so it's usually more casual, but when I call, she usually knows that there's something up, because it's like, I need to talk to you now kind of thing. And that helps alleviate the pressure a lot. And I think that's the main way that she helps me with my own hangups and my own mental well-being is because I can approach her with my anxieties and my own scatterbrainness once I get into these states. And she doesn't outright tell me calm down, but she guides me to calming down, and then thinking rationally, putting things in perspective, and then being able to move forward with a solution, or at least a path towards a solution, if not the actual thing. Honestly, I think that's another sign. That's a huge sign. If you can just be able to turn to someone when you're in a really bad state, and they're not going to flip out and say, "Oh, listen, it's not a good time right now. The Rangers are playing." That's good. That's a good, secure feeling to have. Just to be able to say, you know what, this person, if I'm in distress, is going to drop everything and is going to help me out here. And I think that's fantastic. And then on the other hand as well, you know, it just as much as we're there for each other and helping each other out, we do maintain friendships and communications with other people that we can go to as well, you know, just to be able to sound off on other things, on other levels as well. And sometimes on levels that maybe just naturally we don't quite get the full picture. And someone has a better grasp of the situation to help out. And that's healthy as well, you know. I think I think it's a good balance between both ultimately.
Knowing your limits. Like
Mhm.
we talk about in AA, you know, so that's probably what he's mostly thinking of is, you know, he can't help me with triggers for alcoholism. He can't help me with that. He doesn't have experience with it. So then I go to my sponsor, and we talk about that in AA too. Like, I can't help somebody with something if I don't have experience with it, or if I can't personally connect with that on some level. I'm doing more damage essentially if I try to fix that than if I am to go, maybe you should call this woman, or maybe you should do this. So knowing your limits too. Yeah.
Mhm.
I really like the sound of that. And I really like the fact that you both are able to help each other in such a personal way, knowing what you can and cannot do for each other and trying to just make each other better. I think that's beautiful.
I think that, I mean, what's the alternative? Tearing each other down? Yeah.
You'd be
You know,
Yeah.
surprised. That's the option for a lot of people, unfortunately.
well, no, I know,
Sad.
but it, you know, there's no point in it. You know,
Right.
why wouldn't you want someone to be the best possible version of themselves?
Hmm.
That's what I want from Kristen. That's what I want for her. I want her to be the best possible version of her. And I'm going to help her along as much as I can.
There's so, I mean, my goodness. Look at the field we work in. There's so many people already like wake up in the morning at 3 a.m. with like all kinds of racism and like all kinds of isms just ready to ruin our days and tear us down. Like, why would we want to do that to each other? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I'm glad both of y'all chose the right approach for each other and y'all making it work. That's why you're engaged after all, which on that subject, I'm curious, how did you two get to the point where you decide you want to go from dating to being engaged? And has that changed the dynamic by any chance?
I don't think it's changed the dynamic.
Nah.
I mean, we still occasionally like I'm not like a bridezilla where I have to call him my fiance or husband to be or hubby to, you know, it's like sometimes I still call him my boyfriend, and I think it got to the point because it was just like, why not? And it's funny because my parents, they had a very similar setup to their marriage. Was like, well, why not, right? I guess we should do this because, you know, for me and him, it's like I know that there's nothing better out there for me. You know, he just intrinsically gets me. It wasn't much like on a personality level or you know, likes and dislikes and long walks on the beach. There wasn't much like disagreement. It's very natural. And
Yeah.
even when he came to visit for the first time, it was like he had been living with me for years. It was so
It was
natural.
it was simple.
And we we were talking about it for a while, and mainly the discussion was, do we want to get married? And I'll tell you, at first he did not want to. and then it was like, well, I just want to spend the rest of my life with you, so why not? And it wasn't even like, because we live in different countries, nobody got on one knee. It was sort of like, why don't we just move this forward? Because there's no reason to sit still. And part of it was just the shock of COVID. I think was like, that's when you start to know what really matters to you in life. And it was like, I don't want to lose this person because I'm losing toilet paper and hand sanitizer and Dr. Pepper now for some reason. So like, we're losing everything else. I don't want to lose this person, so why not just make that next step? And I would gather that anybody who is really right for each other and really works to make it work, that they would have the same thing to say, that next step is never really hard to make.
Yeah. I completely concur with her analysis. I think it's very, I think it's very spot on. That's exactly it. Um, yeah, the situation in which we're in just makes you think. It just makes you like, look, what are the things that can bring some form of stability or certainty? Just things that you can latch on to, things to look forward to as well. You know, because it's not going to be like this forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Hope so.
Yeah.
So you know, you do want you do want things to change, and you want to provoke it in your own little bubble at the same time, you know. So it just felt normal and natural, which has always been our case, right? It's always been very easy, very simple, very natural, and
Yep.
yeah, it just needed to happen. That being said, I was broken up about it because technically speaking, I was supposed to pop over here a few months ago in April, just before I had bought my plane tickets um, before COVID hit and the border started closing, and I was supposed to pop over here, and I kind of had this in the back of my mind where I was like, you know what, I'm going to propose and I'm going to get down on one knee and so on. And we started talking about it, and when I couldn't go and I was broken up and I was climbing up because I always I felt like she deserved it. You know what I mean? And I felt like she deserved the moment. But when we talked about it, she was like, "Dude, I don't care about you getting on one knee." You know, so that's not what's important here. What's important is it's the statement. It's the statement. It's what we commit to. That's what was more meaningful to her. So I stopped crying and
Mhm.
and we made it happen, and it turned out being a fantastic decision.
And I couldn't be more happy for y'all.
Thank you.
And before we end this podcast, I'm curious if there's any advice either you have for either couples listening now hoping to have what y'all have, or just single people out there wondering, how do I get the type of relationship that y'all have?
Get into wrestling. That would be my
Don't don't take that advice. Terrible. Terrible advice.
Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead, Chris.
My advice would be yourself.
Yeah.
There's so much pressure, and like there's whole industries built on like people not wanting to be themselves and to get a partner, and who wants that? Like I tried several times to be somebody I wasn't to get a guy, and it didn't work. Well, no shit, right? Like no duh. Be yourself. It it may take a while to come. This is the first relationship I can say is a real relationship, and I'm 34 years old. And it felt like it was never going to happen. I was committed to buying cats and a bunch of Benadryl because I'm allergic to them, and living in spinsterhood if I had to. But I just kept being myself and being open to new things and talking to new people, but also like not pretending to be somebody I'm not. And that also goes with people who are in relationships, because if you're finding yourself like faking it every day, then why would you want to be in your I don't want to fake it for the next 50 years. That sounds horrible. Like I want to be in a relationship no matter what age it is with somebody that I really care for, and then I can be myself in. So be yourself, peoples.
Yep. I go with that. Just be yourself. Never mind any societal pressure. I don't think there's any good age or there's no ceiling as to when you can meet the right person. There really isn't. I'm in my mid 40s and I just found the right person. It's just, as long as know what you want and be yourself. And, you might get your heart broken in the process a couple of times, and you might hit a wall, but they always end up being learning experiences. Might be tough ones and hard ones, but the truer you stay to yourself, I think that's the truer you stay to yourself, the better chances you'll find the right person.
Very well said from the both of you, and thank you again for coming on. And
But
before, I'm sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was going to say thank you, but please continue.
Oh yeah, the only other thing that we have left is that like I have this segment on our show that I like to end with where I call it giving my guests their flowers in case there's a chance that we never speak again, which obviously us three are hopefully going to speak again, but in case I lose my hands or I lose my voice box, I may never speak again. So I just want you both to know how much I appreciate you. With Kristen, and you gave me my first A job, and I've always been very, very grateful for the opportunities you gave me, and it really opened a lot of doors for me from working under you. And I say working under you, but I never felt for one second you made me feel like that I was working side by side with you and like we were equals. And I always appreciate that. And even though we weren't working for the same site anymore, even now, even as I'm left wrestling media, you've still found ways to support me, and I cannot thank you enough for that. I can say the same for Mr. Warren Hayes here too. Especially with like the times where he's brought me onto his podcast, just hit me up saying, "Hey, I need to fill airtime," or "I have a big topic that I think that you'd be a perfect guest for." I always appreciate that. And what I really appreciate Warren for is I'm gonna give away a podcast secret here, but like a year ago, when I tried to run a wrestling podcast for the website I used to work for, Daily DET, I just asked Warren for some general advice. I expected like just a message or a DM back. Warren basically called me and had a 30 to 45-minute call telling me everything I need to know about podcasts while he was at work. So he basically gave me some valuable advice on his lunch break, took some valuable time out of his day just to speak to me, and I never forgot that. I really appreciate that. I appreciate you both. I respect y'all, and I love y'all. Thank you again for everything.
You're making me cry.
Oh.
That's the sweetest thing I've ever heard. That segment is the sweetest thing I've ever heard. And
Thank
We
you.
love you. We love you back.
we do.
Jam.
Like,
Crazy.
Thank you.
you're one of our best friends in this field.
Absolutely.
And I mean,
Oh,
like, I remember when I first started writing, I was so lost because I was a new fan and I was a brand new fan. And there are a couple people from Daily DT at that time who really stuck around and are still around in my life. And you're one of them. And you're right. You never worked under me. You worked with me because you had an insight that a lot of people don't have, and you have a natural talent. I never had to like train you to do anything. You always had a natural talent, and you're funny, and you have the best gift game. And it's not hard to be your friend and support you because you do wonderful things. And I'm sad that you're not in wrestling media because I feel like your voice is so important, but I also respect your decision. And I am so proud of you for this podcast. It's a big deal. It's a big jump. And I will shout to the rooftop and above that everybody needs to come listen.
Yeah, absolutely. The pride of you starting this podcast here outside of the scope of wrestling on a very wide topic, which I think is fantastic and one that does need more light to be shined upon, is fantastic. And I feel like a proud papa on that level because yeah, I do remember the call and you're like, aren't you at work? It's like, yeah, it's fine, it's fine, don't worry about it. So yeah, but like Kristen said, you're extremely good at what you do. You're very, 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 very smart. You have great insight, very talented. So I'm extremely proud of you, and thank you for the kind words. I only have the same for you, my friend.
Thank you so much. Now y'all making me cry. Like I had to again, I'm glad I'm not on camera. I had to grab the tissue box really quick. Great couple, right? Just a lovely, lovely pair of individuals who, if you want to see more of, there are plenty of places to choose from. For Kristen Ashly, you can visit her website, belltobells.com, which I affectionately call the greatest women's wrestling website on the planet. It was an inside joke, but I'll die on that hill. I'll stand by my words there. She's also the CEO of the Association of Women in Wrestling, which you can follow on Twitter at AWIW.org on Twitter. You can follow her at Kristen Ashly on Twitter, KV Ashley on Instagram, and you can support her on Patreon and Ko-fi. Now, as for Mr. Warren Hayes, you can find him at Mr. Warren Hayes on Instagram, Twitter, and Patreon. And the Mr. Warren Hayes Show is available on all podcast streaming services and has new episodes every Thursday night at 9 p.m. usually. And as for us, at the Mental Health Check-In podcast, which I say us, but it's really just me. It's a weird habit I can't break, but we're at Check-In Pod on Twitter, Mental Health Check-In Pod on Instagram, and Mental Health Check-In Pod at gmail.com. Feel free to DM me, email me, or tweet at me anything you don't like me doing about the podcast so I can stop doing it. Or just tell me what you like about the podcast so I can keep doing it, because positive reinforcement goes a long way. Just use the power you wield in your fingertips. And before we go, I just want you to know that you are loved and you are deserving of love. Take care and take care of yourself.